I'm short. All right, we're going to get started. So welcome to our November Web Editors meeting. Um, we are talking about accessibility today, and we are streaming today. So when it comes to question and answer times, look for either Vanessa or myself, and we'll run up with the microphone so that those who are watching over the stream can hear your questions as well. And so without further ado, we have invited Scott Williams, who's the University Web Accessibility Coordinator for the university, has been since 2009, to come and talk to you guys about the accessible web. And just a couple notes, he moderates the U of M Web working group.
Right,
You mostly moderate that?
Right.
Okay.
I moderate the mail list and also run the Web Accessibility Working Group,
Yep.
which meets monthly, and anybody can come to it. It's just a support group for people doing accessibility.
Cool. So actually, and with
Okay.
that, I'll let him take over.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see some familiar faces. I work out of the Office for Institutional Equity, and our office is concerned with defending people's civil rights on campus. And my particular purview is making sure that folks with disabilities can access our online infrastructure. I encourage emails, so if you have any question out of the blue, you're working on something or have any other sort of accessibility question, please feel free to email me at swims, S-W-I-M-S, @umich.edu. I also frequent Twitter and post about things accessibility, and my handle's at swimz. It's just my unique name with a Y tacked on the end. I also maintain an online web accessibility resource. You can get to it at umich.edu/webaccess. That's all one word. And it's a good primer for web accessibility. So, any questions before we get started in that regard? Okay. When we talk about disabilities in the web, we break down the realm of disabilities into four rough categories. It would be visual, so people who are low vision, also people who are blind, people that have color blindness, other sorts of or have trouble with other sorts of visual processing. Hearing, so partial to total deafness, motor. And that would be people that have dexterity issues and can't use a mouse. A lot of the web is kind of predicated on mouse commands, and that is problematic. Also cognitive. The poster child for accessibility is the blind screen reader user. It's usually the first thing people think of when they think of web accessibility, but actually people with cognitive disabilities make up a larger segment of the disability community than people with perceptual or motor disabilities combined. So 1 in 5 people have a disability. Very large incidence. And it's estimated that about 1 in 10 people have a disability that affects their use of the web. One thing of note in terms of demographics is the current standards largely ignore folks with cognitive disabilities. There aren't a lot of guidelines and suggestions for actually producing a website that is cognitive friendly, so to speak. So I would say, characterize it as pretty much the frontier of web accessibility. It's something that really in the next version of standards hopefully will be addressed. And it would, I think, greatly benefit everybody that uses the web. I think there's a tendency to make a lot of our pages more complicated now. There's sort of the urge to be able to route people to anywhere on the site from any page. And that kind of architecture is problematic. It makes for a more complicated and confusing interface for everybody, but particularly for those with cognitive disabilities. So what is web accessibility? It's not really, one thing is we're not really coding it specifically for any particular disability. Something that might have incredibly great contrast for people who are low vision, if it's like black text on a white background. If I am dyslexic, for instance, that type might vibrate on the page. It might be very difficult for me to process, actually. So it's kind of a balancing act, and really what we're trying to do is to reach the widest possible audience. And that includes people, the so-called able-bodied people. So in my experience of using mostly screen readers is what I use. When I'm doing a lot of testing, that's just my experience. There are other people like Jane Vincent at the university, who is our adaptive technology specialist, who is much more adept at using other types of assistive technology, such as voice activated, like Dragon Naturally Speaking. So I could actually use voice control to navigate the web. That's not my particular expertise, but in using screen readers, I have no problem, and actually watching a lot of people with disabilities try to use the web, I have no problem characterizing the web as currently being hostile to people that are trying to navigate their way through our online interface. A lot of our processes currently at the university, I mean, we're working on making them more accessible and user-friendly, but right now there are a lot of scenarios where it'd be very difficult for somebody who has a severe disability to be able to perform their work effectively. That's something to keep in mind. And that's not something anybody would necessarily be aware of unless you were actually using assistive technology. One thing that accessibility is it's really pretty much joined at the hip with usability, particularly as our web interfaces become more and more like desktop applications. Google Apps is a great example, and less like static web pages. All of a sudden, how the user interacts and the ease with which they interact with these interfaces becomes more important. So mobile is my friend. Mobile interfaces tend to be pared down, more streamlined, less choices, less screen real estate that's necessary to have command of, to be able to operate the interface. A very good influence on accessibility. They're pretty much dovetail with each other. And also, if you improve the accessibility of your site, you will also improve the search engine optimization as well. Really, Google is a glorified screen reader, and anything that a screen reader can't access, Google's going to have trouble indexing as well. And I don't know what the secret recipe is for the Google search, but I can tell you that well-formed pages that are accessible and coherent are ranked more highly than pages that have difficulties in those regards. So the best way to actually accomplish accessibility, because we're not trying to actually code to this disability, that disability, keep this one in mind as well, is to adhere to standards. And we'll talk a little bit about the standards that we're trying to adhere to in just a little bit. So I don't want to get too in-depth about this, but it is useful to think about accessibility in two different ways. One is technical accessibility, and this is something that a lot of the responsibility falls on the people that maintain the web platform to make sure your templates are coded correctly, according to standards. It's sort of necessary but not sufficient for a good web page. It's kind of like using good grammar is necessary for good writing, but we all know, something can be grammatically correct and still largely incomprehensible. So the technical side is, analogous to getting the grammar right, but there's also a functional side to accessibility. So not only is the code correct, but even though the interface may be apparent and operable technically, does it really require the same amount of effort from a user that a non-AT user would experience? So we really want to provide equivalent access, which means substantially similar effort. Most AT users are accustomed to having to spend more time navigating a web page. That's to be expected, but we really try to minimize that as much as possible. So technical, is it possible to accomplish this? Functional is, well, I can do it, but how big a pain in the rear is it for me to actually get through this interface? And the standard that I've been pushing on campus ever since I've got here, actually it came out shortly before I started in my current position in 2009, is the W3C's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, second version. 3 different levels, A, AA, and AAA. We're kind of going for the Goldilocks AA. And I really do like this standard. One of the things I like about it is that it's principle-based and not based on, it doesn't call out specific technologies for the guidelines. So the 4 basic principles, which form the acronym POUR, are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. So can I get at the information? Can I operate the controls and navigate around the site? Is it understandable to me? Is the language good web language, which is simpler than print language and easier to follow and chunked in smaller amounts? And is it robust? So am I adhering to standards? And so that content can be adaptable to many different forms of assistive technology. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG for short, is pretty much the de facto world standard. The European Union has adopted it. It's an ISO standard. It's been adopted by Australia, many other countries. It's also heavily cited in U.S. case law. I have a little video here. It's from my colleagues in the University of Washington, and they have a great accessibility shop there. And this video, it's a few years old now, but it's still wonderfully apt. It does a great job of sort of exposing folks to the various forms of assistive technology and also how they relate to the principles of WCAG. So let's see if we can get this rolling. Oh. Let's see, we need to...
Order your products, sign up for your services, enroll in your classes, read your opinions, and watch your videos. You'll never see them, but they know you through your website. Or maybe not. Your website's visitors aren't a faceless mass of identical mouse clickers, but a vibrant community of individuals with varying tastes, styles, and abilities. To be successful in designing your site, you have to think about how those individuals access your information. We'll show you how to design websites that are usable by individuals employing a wide variety of technologies. This includes people with disabilities.
Terrell Thompson.
Well, it's important for web designers and developers to realize that what they see currently on their computer, at their resolution, with their browser and their operating system, is not going to be necessarily the same thing that everybody else sees.
Technology Accessibility Specialist.
There's no normal or standard way to describe all the individuals who make up our society. And there's no single profile of people who use the internet. Almost everyone uses it, and they use it all the time.
It's just to participate in society. More of what we're doing is online. You know, the way that we're interacting with people, the way that we're buying our groceries, the way that we're
Wendy Chisholm.
working, learning, paying our taxes.
Web Accessibility
It's all
Specialist.
very important stuff. Hey, look at this.
Not everyone will access your site using a keyboard, a mouse, and a monitor. Some people will be using cell phones or touchscreens. Others may access the web using refreshable braille devices or computer-generated speech for output.
But you don't change the structure of the brain.
For example, comma.
Some users might interact using speech recognition or other assistive technology for input. They may navigate by keyboard alone because they're unable to use a mouse.
Dan Comden.
Nobody wants to make a barrier to their web page. However, it's very easy to do so without knowing everything that you might need to know about accessibility and what are the things that affect the ability of somebody to visit a web page.
Some of those potential barriers affect people with disabilities. They may not be able to see graphics because of visual impairments or hear audio due to hearing impairments. They may be physically unable to use a mouse. They may have learning disabilities that make it difficult to navigate a cluttered web page. And you don't want them to give up on your site.
It makes sense that you would want as many customers as possible to get through your doors, whether they're physical doors on the street or virtual doors on the web.
It's just intelligent thinking about your design and just making sure that you've considered factors. When you design a car, you've got to think about all the different places it's going to go and all the needs people will have with that car. It's the same thing with the website.
Universal design is key to building web content that's accessible and usable for diverse visitors.
Well, to me, universal design means addressing the needs of the widest possible audience with all of their abilities that you can possibly do given the technology at hand. It's an approach that really benefits lots and lots of people.
It has a semantic base, it has a good framework that can be flexible and that people can take from it what they need and they can change it into something that's going to work for them. So it's just a well-designed site.
If you can design a website, you can design an accessible one.
The neat thing about web accessibility is that everything you might want to learn about it is available online with some key searches and some resources that are out there, as detailed as you want to get.
The most important thing to keep in mind in developing a website is to comply with standards. So be aware of what the standards are and develop websites that that comply with those standards.
The World Wide Web Consortium, known as W3C, has developed and published the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG.
Words appear.
WCAG version 2 states that accessible pages must be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means that a person can access the information.
The point of that is how you're making the information available to the person's senses. So if someone is not able to see, what information are they missing? Well, they won't be able to see color, they won't be able to see images, those types of things. So you need to provide equivalents. You need to provide text that the screen reader can use to make that information perceivable.
Using good semantic HTML is key to making information accessible to someone using a screen reader.
If you're someone who's using a screen reader and you come to a form where there's a checkbox, it won't be identified as a checkbox unless you put some code in there that says this is a checkbox. So for the person who's using the page visually, It will look and it will act like a checkbox. But for someone who can't see that and get that information, then you need to provide in the underlying code something that the screen reader can use to indicate that that's a checkbox.
Images on a page need to have text associated with them.
In this case, this is an image that, even I who can see have no idea what it means, so the alt attribute is actually helpful for me. The text equivalent for this image is microorganisms from a Lake Washington mud sample.
And some of them have disabilities.
For users with hearing impairments, the perceivable principle requires captioning video and transcribing audio elements.
Matt, student, signing.
When I'm going into a website, it'll go right past me if it happens like there's music or talking and there's no captioning there. I just get lost, and then I'll have to ask my friend, would you tell me what that says? And then I really feel lost.
If somebody can't hear that content, they're not going to have access to it. So for video, we need captions. For audio, we need transcripts. And that also helps other people too, who may be on a slow modem connection and don't have the bandwidth to support viewing a video or even listening to an audio podcast.
Another benefit of captioning or transcribing is that it makes your multimedia content fully searchable using a text-based search. And that benefits everybody.
Words appear.
Operable means being able to interact with the information.
But if somebody can't use a mouse or is using a technology that is not mouse-based, maybe they're using speech recognition, maybe they're using a handheld device with a stylus, or lots of assistive technologies, eye gaze technologies, head pointers, mouth sticks, any number of different technologies, they still need to be able to operate the buttons, click on the links, make the menus appear.
So tab moves the cursor from link to link.
Design your site to be operable with keyboard commands as an option for people who don't use a mouse.
And unfortunately, many websites are designed so that you have to use a mouse and to click on a button or to, slide your mouse different ways to access a website. This is the College of Engineering website at the University of Washington. It's been designed using a standard-based approach and has incorporated accessibility features in it. There's a navigation bar across the middle of the page that includes About Us, Departments, Faculty and Research, Give to Engineering, and some other options. Using the mouse, when I mouse over these, a menu pops up. And under About Us, we have several options within that menu. What I want to show now is that I'm not going to use the mouse, but I still want to try to get to those menu items. And if I use the Shift-Tab key, I'll go back to Departments, and if I hit Shift-Tab again, I go to About Us. The menu hasn't popped up, but if I press Return, I go to a new web page, and here are those options that had been on the previous page. So I can access all of the menus using the keyboard only, which is important.
Words appear.
Understandable means that the information is presented in a predictable way that makes sense to users.
Understandable is making sure that the content is understandable both to the technology and to the people, but one of the main things you can do there is to mark what human language is used on the website. If it's a site that's written in English, you can mark it as English. If it's in French, it's French. And it becomes really important if it's a site that goes back and forth. If you may have some English interspersed with some French, like the United Nations website.
Rick Ellis,
You have to
computer specialist.
figure out what task a person is trying to do when they come to your website. And then you try to design the page to make it easy for them to easily, effectively, properly do the task correctly the first time.
Michael, student.
I think everybody would like a simple web page. It's a lot less complicated and a lot less cluttered. It just looks a lot better.
Words appear.
Robust means that these principles will continue to apply as new technology is developed.
Robust is that the website and the technologies used in the website are going to work well with assistive technologies. And it's also looking forward to when new browsers and new devices come out, that it'll continue to work.
Kayla.
I got a laptop when I was a senior in high school.
Student.
And I used that for everything. And then about a year and a half ago, I got the iPhone. And pretty much 90% of what I do is on my phone now.
Another W3C standard is ARIA, Accessible Rich Internet Applications. ARIA provides methods for ensuring that dynamic web applications are accessible to individuals with disabilities.
So the challenge now with more interactive web content is you have things changing, so it's not just a static page. You perform some action as a user, and that triggers content changes elsewhere on the page. So things become a lot more complex. A key to making all this happen is standards and guidelines.
Adopting standards such as the W3C's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and ARIA is critical for accessibility. Another source is the United States Access Board's Section 508 standards. Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act is a law requiring federal agencies to ensure that their information technology, including websites, is accessible.
Words appear.
Key steps to accessible website design include design standards-based websites using HTML for content and structure and CSS for presentation. Clearly mark up the structure of your site using HTML elements such as headings, subheadings, lists, and paragraphs. Provide alternate text for all images. Design all content so that it's operable by keyboard. Provide transcripts of audio and captions for video. Write as clearly and simply as possible. Comply with web accessibility standards such as the W3C's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines and ARIA. Test your site with accessibility in mind, and if possible, ask individuals with disabilities to test your site.
The way that I like to test things is I inspect the website and I look for the things that need to be there. So, do images have an alt attribute? And if they do, does it make sense? You can turn off style sheets and you can look at how the page looks without the style sheets. What's the actual structure, the framework of that content?
People use keyboards, a colorful 2-button device, a braille display, and an iPhone.
You want as many people as possible to access your information. If your website is designed well, everyone who visits it will be able to do that successfully.
The web is flexible, that's the beauty of it, and that it can transform, that someone can increase the font size and someone else can change the color, is really the beauty of using all these bits and using digital media, is that it is flexible. And that's exactly what makes it accessible, and that's what makes it work on mobile devices and over the phone and however else you want to access it.
Words appear.
For more information,
Any questions? Okay. Again, I really like that video because it does a great job of just showing the breadth of assistive technology out there. So there's also a legal aspect to all of this, and most of us want to do the right thing. We're working towards developing a policy here at the university, and I'll be very glad when that day comes. You can talk to people about what the various legal requirements are, but their eyes glaze over pretty quickly, and there's just enough distance away when you're describing these laws that it's something that people can wouldn't say ignore exactly, but it's like, well, we probably won't get audited, or this is something that we'll take care of in the near future. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk about some of the legal requirements, and so we're bound by in the university by the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, also the Americans with Disability Act of 1990, and Michigan's Persons with Disabilities Civil Rights Act of 1976. And there's plenty of case law out there as well. The last bullet point on this slide, and universities that have been subject of legal complaints are Penn State, Montana very recently, New York University, Northwestern, Harvard, and MIT were recently called out for their failure to caption their online course materials. Louisiana Tech, Florida State, Target, Southwest Airlines. So it applies to companies as well. The Ramada Inn. Arizona State University was sued for deploying the older Kindle in a pilot study. It wasn't even university-wide. And the Kindle's become, I don't think it's anybody's go-to device, but and I think it's had fits and starts, but they have generally improved the accessibility of the Kindle. And when I first came here, there was a lot of scrutiny of the Law School Admission Council website. It was a website that everybody had to go through to apply to law schools. And it's kind of like the Common App for law schools. And unfortunately, it was not accessible. So one of my first tasks when I came here was to make an accessible version of that application that people applying to U of M Law School could use instead of the LSAC site. One thing to keep in mind is that after a student makes a complaint, they're having some sort of difficulty, and usually there's some resistance on the part of the institution in meeting that student's needs. And if that student decides to pursue a complaint through the Department of Education Civil Rights Division, pretty much all hell breaks loose. Once the federal government comes in, they tell you what you're going to do to remedy the situation, who you're going to hire, and what timeline you're going to use to actually become compliant. So not a very pleasant experience, as anybody will tell you. When Penn State was notified, they were notified on Christmas Eve. And they underwent an extensive remediation process. But anyway, we like to be ahead of the curve here, and so we'll do our due diligence and avoid that situation. So when you're populating a website, there's a few things that are worthwhile to keep in mind and that you can do as a content editor. I realize that there is a structure to your form, so a lot of that hopefully is taken care of. A lot of the accessibility is taken care of just in the back end of the interface. And so all that you should have to do as a content editor is just comply with a few basic rules. I hope it wasn't too intimidating. We talk about this, the WCAG guidelines, and they are kind of extensive, but really we can winnow those guidelines down to a few basic points that as a content editor you can do to make your web pages more accessible and easier for everybody to use. So one thing we can do is use a proper heading hierarchy to organize your page, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Using correct markup for your data tables. I don't know if there's an opportunity with your system to insert tables into the content. Okay. And so that would be something that would be handled in the background then. If it's just defining a table and then filling in the cells. This is kind of an opportunity for me to get to know your new CMS as well. And so that's something I can work with the webmasters on. But when you make a table correctly, if someone is visually impaired using a screen reader, no matter where they are in that table, they should be able to associate the column and row headings to pinpoint what the context for that data point in the table. Another thing when the pages are populated is to make sure the form controls and data entry fields are labeled. Again, that would be the responsibility of your webmaster. giving your images meaningful alt text. It's very surprising to me. It's like the first rule of accessibility practically, but in my audits of university websites, I still find plenty of examples of images that don't have alternative text to describe those images to screen readers. Unless it's actual textual information, a screen reader can't, with an exception, which I can mention briefly, they can't usually parse what is the content of the images. The latest versions of JAWS, a very expensive screen reader program, like $1,200, can actually use character recognition on the on an image. And my associate Walt Stover, who does a lot of our screen reader testing on the interfaces around campus, says that it works reasonably well, but that's not something you can count on working for most screen readers. We also want to caption and make transcripts for your video. I like to have people do both. If there are 40,000 people in the United States alone that have both, that are both blind and deaf, and the transcript will be the only way those folks will actually be able to get at video content. And it's also good to do the, as you probably noticed on the video that we had, you might have noticed the voice in the background describing the context for somebody who couldn't see, and letting them know who was speaking, what was going on the screen, and that's called audio description. And right now, we're pushing captioning on campus, but really very closely on the heels of that, we also have to address the needs of folks that need audio descriptions as well. Any questions? All clear as mud? Well, we got to do the microphone thing, sorry.
Scott, can you talk about, I know that our group has consulted with you on the underlying design for some of the, the new web platform. I don't know if you can talk about that, or Maria or Jessica, like the work that you've done with our group.
So I've basically met, and we've talked about some of the principles, a little more detail than I will with folks that are using the CMS. But we did talk about the web content standards and how to implement those. We're actually poised to start looking at the templates of the new platform, and sort of getting underneath the cover and looking at what some of the technical accessibility is of that. And also, actually, Walt, again, my colleague, has started looking at some of the LSA sites with with a screen reader as well. So it's an ongoing relationship, and we're really just getting started. But before we kicked off the new platform, we wanted to have accessibility standards in mind as that was being developed. Much cheaper to or much more, I wouldn't say cheaper, but really it shouldn't cost any more to make a web platform accessible if it's taken into account at the ground floor. What's really the wrong thing to do, it's a classic mistake that Google made, is you kick something out there or develop it, for a couple of years, and then have somebody call you on the accessibility of it, and then try to retrofit it back in. So that's something that's we've circumvented, and so I actually look forward to doing continued testing with the group. Does that answer your question? Okay.
So some of the things, kind of like nuts and bolts, was the LSA color palette was tested for accessibility, then contrast with text, the menu structure and how the pop-up works, that kind of stuff. And I think the left-hand menu So all of that kind of goes with that. And Maria and Scott have been kind of working together to make sure that that goes out. And so that was all done spring, summer, before we launched, before we started working with pilots.
And so one of the more complicated things they were talking about was the ARIA specification, or Accessible Rich Internet Application. And that's not actually a standard, it's a spec. And so we kind of looked at that when we were looking at activating these menus, because one of the things we'll talk about is that making sure that your web page is operable with just a keyboard. And that's some of the testing that we did on those initial templates to make sure we could do everything with a keyboard. If you can't do everything with a keyboard, a lot of the assistive technology commands are built on those keyboard actions and commands. So if you can't do it with your humble keyboard, and anybody can test it, it can be a content editor, it can be a webmaster, project manager, or an auditor, such as myself. If you can't do something with a keyboard, then you know there's going to be some accessibility problems. There was another question too.
I was just wondering, for like videos in YouTube, is there a setting you can turn on for captions, or do we have to enter the text?
Right. So if it's your own video, the thing to stress with your own video that you own is that you don't want to let Google machine generate the default caption. Some people will say, "Wow, look, it captioned it for me. Great, shoo, I dodged that bullet." Unfortunately, depending on the speaker, if it's a professional speaker speaking fairly slowly or at a reasonable pace, you can get pretty good accuracy on that. However, most of us are not professional speakers. We have quirks and idiosyncrasies, and the accuracy rate can be much lower, like 60%, which is pretty, and it ends up being unintentionally comical too. And if the video is treating something a serious subject matter, then it can be really kind of a horrifying result. But there are two things you can do. One is to let Google go ahead and make a default caption, and then you can use various tools to actually clean up those captions. It's just a simple text file, the caption file. You can download it. You can correct the grammatical mistakes, bad words. What it's done for you is to timestamp everything. And that is the really time-consuming part of captioning. And I'm not saying it's a trivial exercise to clean up these files, but it's doable and unfortunately necessary. If you have a really long video, it's good to use a third-party vendor like Automatic Sync Technologies is one that's used all throughout higher ed. Let them do the caption and then bring it and upload it up into YouTube. Another thing you can do is if you have a transcript already, it was prepared text, say, for the video. If the text matches what the actual speaker is saying, you can just have Google's make much better quality captions by uploading that transcript, and then it will time sync the correct words and match them the best it can. Is that okay?
The third-party one, is there a cost to that to have a third?
There is a cost to that, and it's actually, if you're if you're taking your own time into account, it's much, because they're so efficient at it. That's what they do. It's much more cost effective than to say have somebody like myself, because it's about per media time. It takes about 12 times the median minutes to caption a video. So a 1 hour, video is going to take 12 hours to do, and I've done it before, and it's a lot of work. So automatic sync, the last time I checked, their price was like $2.65 per media minute. And most of your videos tend to be like in the 8 to 10 minute range, and so you're talking less than $20 to caption a video. I'm not saying it's trivial, but it's not a real huge cost. And in terms of the feds, they're not going to be overly sympathetic that you didn't want to pay for captioning, unfortunately. So we are trying to also develop more resources on campus to assist faculty, and so that's something I've been pushing for and will continue to push for. So I think there was a third question in there somewhere. Nope. Okay. So I would say that the top issues for content editors that I've seen on campus are a lack of semantic headers. In other words, this may be, if you don't have any experience with HTML, seem a little vague, but there's a specific code you use to designate something as a header in your text, or a header organizing content. And unless the web page is coded that way, a screen reader really won't know that it's a header. So in other words, if I make something 18-point bold, for a visual user, it's like, yeah, that's a header. It's about as obvious as can be. However, if it's just formatted locally, that is not something a screen reader user will be able to capitalize on. Also, poor link descriptions. So the text that you use to describe a link is often an issue. Specifically, link text that is overly general and doesn't uniquely identify what the link is about. Low contrast. And really, the prototypes for the LSA sites were pretty darn good when I saw them, and there was like maybe one or two very small issues. So that should, be taken care of for you, except if you're like putting an image or something on the site. First, you're gonna need to put alt text there, but also for low vision users, you're gonna want to make sure that those letters are easy to parse. So there's a good amount of contrast between the letters and the background. And then image links without alt text. Okay, so one of the things that screen readers can do is it can list all the headings on a page. So, and very briefly, if I'm using a screen reader, I can see what the basic organization and what the major topic areas are for the content. So very important to, first of all, use an H1 heading that marks the beginning of the main content and is something that a screen reader can use a screen reader user can use to get right to the business end of the page and avoid the navigation and any other kind of ancillary content that they're not really interested in. That H1, and this is something that we can talk about, it in theory should match the heading, the title on the page, and the title is a special HTML tag that goes on the top of the page. Any questions?
I just want to clarify that the H1 tag is built into the templates. So the heading tags that you'll see in the AEM content area, they are H2 and lower.
Okay. And I would say, as long as that's consistent, which it undoubtedly is, will not really throw somebody with a screen reader user. So one of the things you do want to do, so the H1 is supplied for you on the screen. Then we have in this image, we have that followed by H2 tags, and the only thing following the H2 tags are H3 tags. So you want to nest those appropriately, and really that's just basic outline format that you would have used to write an essay in school. The important thing here is not to jump multiple levels between, like, say, an H2 and then jump to an H5. Again, it's not going to necessarily totally throw somebody off the trail if they're using a screen reader, but it doesn't give them any kind of confidence either in the page, because they know they can't rely necessarily on the heading structure to see how the content is organized. So the next thing is there, so when I add an image with your CMS, is there a field for alternative text?
It's in the assets. So for those who are trained in the system, you have to go through the site admin and edit or get to your image and add the alt text there. So it's not directly on the on-page edit system, I believe.
Okay.
Oh, right. Sorry, it's in the page properties if you're on the on-page editing system.
Right. So very important that you use that that interface to add alternative text to any images that you're adding to the page, and we want to use those for all informative images, graphical representation of text, so like drop caps, equations and symbols. The form controls and text fields should be taken care of by the CMS. That shouldn't be something that you should have to concern yourself with. And the same for any graphical buttons. So sometimes instead of using native HTML elements for web controls, people will design their own with JavaScript and use their own images. And when you do that, you have to ensure that that you're building in accessibility into those widgets, but that should be taken care of for you. And then audio files and podcasts need alternative text. And the last bullet point here is an example of alternative text for the Block M logo. And I've just given it the description, a University of Michigan Block M logo. And here's another example of alt text. It's a young man on a climbing wall and reaching for a handhold. And so the alt text that I've really what you want to do two things with alt text, ideally. One, you want to explain very briefly what's in the image, and then you want to actually describe what's the purpose of the image. Why did you put it on the page? Presumably it's not just wallpaper or decoration, although if it is, you can, there are ways of dealing with that as well. And the alt text that I'm giving this is young man on a climbing wall reaching for a hold, which symbolizes a navigation element available to assistive technology. Kind of highfalutin maybe, but it gives you the idea of this subject matter of the image and also what you're trying to convey. Okay, one thing that you want to do is is it possible to link images? Okay, so now that I've told you how to make an alt text, I'm going to add a little amendment to that. If, say on that Block M logo, that might be a very common thing to do would be to link to the university homepage. So if I'm using a screen reader and I come across an image of a Block M logo, it's not going to be, and it's linked, which will be announced to a screen reader. It's not really useful for me to know that it's the Block M logo, because what will be announced to me is link Block M logo. And it's like, okay. And I can figure out probably that, well, this probably maybe a link to the U of M homepage, but really one of the main rules of user interface design is don't make your users think. It should just be very intuitive, and the response should almost be automatic what to do. So what I will do instead with that image is actually describe what the destination of the page is. So instead of U of M block M logo, I would say University of Michigan homepage. So when the screen reader announces it, it says link U of M homepage. Does that make sense? For those of you that use Twitter, the length of alt text can be about a tweet length, or about 140 characters. If it needs to be longer than that, you should describe the image in your inline text that is probably above in the reading order the image, or link to a separate page. And here's a handy flowchart. We can make these slides available on SlideShare, so you can have access to this, to all the resources, and also all of the slides. I'll make sure these get up on SlideShare today. This is a really nice flowchart for the role of an image. So if it's merely decorative, the underlying code will be alt equals null, and I'm not sure if you don't go into the interface and assign an alt text, if that's what the code is there.
It probably would be null. I want to say that the field is required when you add an image, or it was meant to be.
Okay.
No, it's not. It was meant to be. So.
Well, that's an interesting question. So a good topic of discussion for the behind the scenes work, because there are some times that maybe we don't want to have alternative text. What happens is if you have the null text that like it's coded there, and you don't have to worry about the web coding, that's taken care of for you. But what happens is the screen reader will ignore that image. So if it is purely decorative, it'll just pretend it's not even there. Okay, if it is an informative image, and the question we want to ask is, does it present new information that wasn't on the page otherwise? So if it repeats text info on the page that's already there, again, we would give it null text, or it wouldn't need alt text, because it's actually going to be kind of redundant and say something twice and be kind of annoying and a distraction to the screen reader user. But if it does have present new information, then we really do need alternative text, and so we would use the interface to provide alt text, and if it's a very long and structured information on the image, then we're going to need to somehow address that in the inline text on the page. So there'll have to be some reference to the image with a description in your inline text as well. Is that clear as mud?
Scott, I do have a quick question.
Sure.
How does a reader read an image that's linked, but that also has a caption?
You mean
Like,
alternative text?
It has, no, the image itself has a caption that's shown on the page. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Like a caption.
And-
It'll read the caption as well.
Okay. Is there a hierarchy where it reads the alt text, the link, and then the caption?
Well, it would be determined by the reading order.
Okay.
So in the code. So if that is above, if that alt text appears above the caption in the reading order, then it would read it once and then read it twice.
Okay.
So it's one of those judgment calls. So, you know, alt text, it seems like a really simple thing. It's just like, but to do it well actually takes a little bit of thoughtfulness. And basically, you're not trying to annoy the screen reader user by listing stuff like 2 or 3 times. You know, it's just like, okay, they got the message. But on the other hand, we don't want to deprive them of information we're giving everybody else. Any other questions about alt text? Probably one of the more complicated things, actually, in the slide deck for you guys. Yes?
So if the caption covers it, you know, like if you have the text on the page, you don't put alt text?
Well, so if I only had a caption, that's a good question. I might actually put a portrait of professor or staff member, and then the caption would be below, giving their full title or whatever. But you could also make an argument like, okay, well, it's essentially, I think you're making the context a little more obvious by giving it alt text as well. Otherwise, if it's just the caption on its own, it's like, oh, why is this person's title in the middle of this page? What's it doing there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
So, and a lot of times you realize it's kind of a balancing act. It's not like there's one obviously right answer and one obviously wrong answer. A lot of accessibility is just kind of trying to put yourself in the role of an assistive tech user and trying to imagine how they might experience what you're putting on the page. So, any other questions? Look, good questions. Okay. So another common mistake is the kind of link text that we give something. In other words, the text that's underlined, describing the destination of where one would go if one were following the link. Like headers, screen readers can actually list all of the links on a page. So I can very quickly ascertain what navigation routes are possible from this page. So when I list all of these links in a row, all of these links descriptions, they need to be uniquely identifying. So you don't want to have like 5 links that say more or read more, for instance. Another characteristic of screen readers is that I can tab through a page through all of the different links on a page. And what will be read when I tab through the page are just those link descriptors. So it's kind of the same scenario as the list. We want them to be uniquely identifying the destination page. Now, one thing that'll happen if you do, say they do get to a link that says here, click here, read this or more, is they can change the mode they're looking at the page and then examine the text that's around that more link and try to determine what the more pertains to. Is there a little blurb in front of it and that describes perhaps better what the destination is? But you can see, well, it's already a little more time consuming to use the assistive technology, and now I'm making that person kind of sort of like pull back and try to figure out what the context is. So you're introducing a distraction and slowing them down even more. Another thing to keep in mind, and I still find this a lot, unfortunately, is using the actual web address or the URL as the link descriptor. And for very simple links like umich.edu, that's not really, that won't be much of an impediment. But some links that are much longer are read as, when they're read by a screen reader, it just sounds like gibberish. And it's actually fatiguing for people that don't use assistive tech to look at these. I mean, you find yourself looking at the URL even though you know and parsing it, because that's what your eyes are trained to do, and it's a distraction for everybody. So generally avoid using the web address as the actual link description. Go ahead and, like, follow the link. What's the title of that page that you go to, and use that instead of the URL. Does that make sense? So you don't have to be super techie to evaluate the page you're working on for accessibility. We mentioned the keyboard as being a tool that you can use to test. And we talked about how a lot of assistive technology actually is based on keyboard commands. So one of the things that when you're looking at your web page with a keyboard is you want to be able to easily navigate to any part of your web page and perform all the operations and functionality using just the keyboard. And you want to make sure that your keyboard focus is never locked or trapped in a particular page element. That's called a keyboard trap, and what it does is it necessitates the user reloading the page if they get stuck on a certain part of the page. So when you test for keyboard accessibility, you want to unplug your mouse or just put it out of reach. I've sat with people and we've looked at interfaces using just the keyboard, and it's just really hard not to reach out and grab that mouse and have it be there without, like, putting it just a little bit out of reach. Easier said than done. So, and then you want to use the tab key. We talked about tabbing to different links in a page, and also for web controls, you should just be able to use the arrow, return, and spacebar keys to operate the page. And one of the things you can do is just tab through your entire page and see where the tab focus goes. And you should see a highlight on the page when you tab to a link. So it should be obvious where you are on that page, and if it doesn't, that's a problem. And we want also the path that your tabbing follows to really follow the visual flow of the page. So it would start typically at the top, work its way through the nav bar, and then into the main content. In other words, there shouldn't be any wild jumping around in the page. That should be, with your templating system, that should be easy to satisfy. That should do that automatically. Things to note are, is there an image link that doesn't receive focus? So in other words, I can't actually get to it with the tab key. And are there expanding text links or tabs that don't work? And hopefully that should be taken care of with the templating system as well too. But something you want to bring up to your webmaster if something isn't operating. A lot of times these things don't come out until they're actually getting more heavily used. And try to submit any forms on your page using just the keyboard. Any questions? Maybe we're getting close to saturation here. One tool that's really popular on campus is the Wave Accessibility Toolbar. And people from all walks of web work, be it project manager or programmers, or I use it as well as the Wave Accessibility Toolbar, which is just a add-on for Chrome, the Chrome web browser. And it has a very it's more of a visual approach than a lot of the other evaluators. So you'll actually display the web page with a lot of icons pointing out either accessibility features or accessibility shortfalls, and so it'll let you know if you're missing alt text for an image, if you're missing form labels, table structure problems, scripting elements, not something you will have to worry about. It'll also point out what the document structure and reading order is, to ensure that the reading order makes sense to someone using assistive tech. That short link at the bottom of the page is a link for adding it to Chrome that you can follow. So what it does actually, this is an example of the format of this. There's a nice little sidebar there that points out the errors in this particular page. And this is an old version of the School of Information page. Excuse me. There are 4 errors, accessibility errors on the page, 47 alerts. Like you can, there's a difference in order of magnitude between the alerts and the errors, and really what the alerts mean is, well, this tool can't really tell you if there's a problem here. You're going to need to visually inspect and make sure. So it may say, yeah, there's alt text for this link, but or for this image, but I can't really tell you if it's meaningful or not. You're going to have to follow the alert. There are 50 accessibility features on the page, which I would expect from the School of Information, and 121 structural elements. That's a lot of, and that means like headers and things like that. That's kind of on the heavy side. That might be difficult to parse. So I can click on these little side icons on the left-hand side, and it'll update the display on the right-hand side of the web page, and will point out the big errors. And really what you'd want to do is just look at the error section, click on the flag beneath the summary icon, and it will itemize all of those errors. I can actually demo that on a page if folks are interested after the lecture. So I also have listed some resources. The first one is my aforementioned web access page, and that's probably the easiest place to start. My favorite one-stop shop for web accessibility on the web is webaim.org, and they're the folks out of Utah State, Jared Smith and company, and it just has a wealth of information. They have the staffing to actually maintain it really well and add new content. One thing that, unfortunately, a lot of accessibility out on the web, sometimes it gets a little long in the tooth, and it's a pretty rapidly changing field. So to have a website like WebAIMS that is painstakingly updated is a real godsend. So there are also mail lists, and depending on your level of involvement with the actual coding, both the WebAIM listserv and also the Athens listserv are really good. All the big hitters participate, accessibility big hitters participate on those lists, and it's a great place for asking a question like alt text or any other kind of accessibility question you may have. Very responsive, and people are very friendly. There is also probably a little bit too in-depth for you folks, but there is also if you're curious, a testing web content for accessibility page on WebAIM that specifically addresses some of the things that we've talked about here today. And that is it, unless you folks have any questions. They say, that's enough. Stop. But that's pretty much what you have to worry about, and more so. So I probably told you a little bit more than you need to be concerned with. But Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you, Scott. And I'm assuming you'll hang out a little bit after some.
I can hang out. We can look at some web pages with the WebAIM tool, or I can just answer questions too.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming, and we should have information about our December meeting in the next couple days. So thank you for your time.